a clear-thinking man with no strange fantasies in his head. When we went to investigate the scene the next day, he almost didn't want to come, he was so scared. Only something exceptional could have frightened him so. During the investigation, Nucci revealed that no less than 52 Torrelia citizens had reported spying a bright, glaring illumination emanating from the direction of the Righi house at exactly the same time Zanfretta testified to watching the triangular UFO rise up into the atmosphere. The story might well have ended there were it not for frenzy that soon descended on the village of Torrelia in the form of a scoop-hungry press who had gotten wind of this extraordinary tale of UFOs, gargantuan alien visitors and a petrified security guard. Not surprisingly, the reactions that most of the television and newspaper reporters had to this story ranged from polite skepticism to outright ridicule of Zanfretta and his mental state. Some even went so far as to flat out assert he was lying about the whole thing. This incredulous attitude was shared by almost all of the journalists, with the sole exception of a reporter named Rino Di Stefano, who was working for the local Genoa daily paper, Il Corriere Mercantile. Di Stefano was intrigued by the Zanfretta case and wrote several articles on the subject. Unlike most of his peers, Di Stefano could not rationalize why a husband and father, who was engaged in a respected profession, would jeopardize both his career and his reputation in the community by making up a story as patently ludicrous as this. So he took it upon himself to contact Zanfretta in order to get to the bottom of this mystery. What seemed to confirm Di Stefano's belief in Zanfretta's sincerity, above and beyond the additional 52 eyewitnesses who claimed to have also seen a bizarre light in the area, was what he attested to be the man's disdain for the dubious fame and local recognition he was now being bombarded with. Zanfretta didn't want to be famous. He refused the notoriety because he was worried about his job and his family. Zanfretta even admitted to Di Stefano that the crank calls people call me on the phone at all hours just to play jokes on me. I don't know what it was that I saw, but I saw it. I am not a liar. If I could have, I wouldn't have reported my experiences, now that I see the consequences. Even Gianfranco Tutti, the director of the Institute of Vigilance, the security company that Zanfretta worked for, who was understandably concerned about the possible negative publicity these events might shed on his company and the reliability of its employees, publicly stated that he believed that the guard was an honest man. On December 23, 1978, the harried Zanfretta, with the encouragement of Di Stefano, agreed to undergo hypnosis in order to shed light on what really happened on the fateful night of December 6. The session was held in Genoa and presided over by Dr. Mauro Moretti, a psychotherapist and member of the Italian Association of Medical Hypnosis. During the session, Zanfretta confirmed that not only had he actually seen beings from another world, but that these colossal fiends had actually abducted him. He further claimed, under hypnosis, that these terrifying apparitions had transported him into a hot, luminous location where they thoroughly examined and interrogated him. According to Zanfretta, the creatures did not speak Italian, but used a strange, luminous device to translate what they were saying. During the same session, Zanfretta also indicated that the creatures came from the planet Titonia, which was located in the third galaxy, and that, perhaps most disturbingly, they want to talk with us and that they will soon return in larger numbers. It should be noted that soon could be a relative concept from species hailing from another world. Sadly, for Zanfretta, the horrific abductions did not stop here. At 11:45 p.m., on the foggy, rain-soaked eve of December 26, just 3 nights after his first hypnosis session, Zanfretta claimed to have been snatched yet again. The guard stated that he was driving his patrol car through the Bargali tunnel, near the Scafra Pass, when he suddenly lost control of the vehicle. The panic-stricken guard immediately radioed in and reported that his car was now driving of its own accord and had emerged from the tunnel. The horrified Zanfretta desperately tried to engage the brakes and the steering wheel to no avail as the Fiat continued to barrel through the drizzly fog bank up a steep incline. After traveling in the presumably remote-controlled automobile for approximately a mile, the Fiat finally came to a bone-jarring halt. Zanfretta was thrust forward by the momentum and smashed his head against the steering wheel. It was then that his car was bathed in a white-hot light. At this point, the security company radio operator claimed that Zanfretta called in, speaking in what he described as a very controlled voice, stating that the car has stopped. I saw a bright light. Now I am getting out. Much like the first incident, Zanfretta and his vehicle were discovered at 1:10 a.m. by another pair of security guards. The first man to spot Zanfretta was Sergeant Emanuele Travanzoli. Travanzoli stated that he found Zanfretta in a field near the road and, despite the continuing downpour, his clothes were warm and dry. Travanzoli also claimed that Zanfretta was in a state of shock, quivering and weeping. This time the men on the scene were disturbed to hear their companion declare, "They say I must leave with them. What about my children? I don't want to. I don't want to." Once again, the carabinieri were called in. After they arrived on the scene, the military officers found, much to their befuddlement, that even though the Fiat had been exposed to the cold downpour for an extended period of time, the roof of the car was as hot as one that had been baking in the scorching sun. Equally inexplicably, the officers revealed that the auto's interior was as hot as an oven. As if that weren't bizarre enough, the military police also discovered that the Fiat was surrounded by inexplicably huge boot prints measuring 20 inches long by 8 inches wide. These odd, almost Bigfoot-like, prints had a distinctive bare spot between sole and heel. This remains one of the most intriguing traces of physical evidence ever to have been left at the scene of an alleged alien abduction. The carabinieri then came across Zanfretta's revolver, a Smith & Wesson .38 Special, which had been fired 5 times. Amazingly, the still scared guard could not recall at whom or what he had fired the weapon. Needless to say, due to the unexplained firing of bullets as well as the public furor surrounding these abductions, the military police's probe into these unlikely events required a full report. On January 3, 1979, all data in the case was collected by Commandant Nucci in a file labeled the Report on the Sighting of Unidentified Flying Objects by Fortunato Zanfretta. This file was forwarded to the magistrate's court in Genoa with an inquiry as to what action should be taken. Finally, after the buck had been passed numerous times, the report was delivered to Magistrate Russo who, a year later on January 11, 1980, certified that it could be filed away with the declaration of no crime committed. The Carabinieri also informed the Italian Department of Interior and other military commands of the incident by 2 telexes sent respectively on December 8 and 28 of 1978. The Carabinieri defined the degree of reliability that these bizarre events actually occurred as good. This concern on the part of the Carabinieri might not seem so far-fetched when one considers the fact that in December of 1978, there were so many UFO sightings across Italy that Falco Accame, a former member of the Italian Parliament, asked both Italy's Premier, Giulio Andreotti, and Minister of Defense, Attilio Ruffini, to inform the Italian Congress about their opinion concerning the nature of the recent UFO sightings and what threats they may pose to the citizens of Italy. Following his second encounter with the unknown, Zanfretta became somewhat of a reluctant celebrity. His employers, concerned about all the publicity as well as the mental health of their armed employee, asked prominent neurologist, Dr. Giorgio Giniotti, to examine Zanfretta. His diagnosis was, the man is in a state of shock, but he is perfectly sane. Dr. Giniotti's conclusions helped to improve the credibility of this once unknown working-class man, but the naysayers were starting to dimly. It was then that Zanfretta agreed to undergo hypnosis under the supervision of Dr. Moretti yet again, and this time he consented to allow it to be televised in an effort to prove he was not insane. You can watch the film session here. During this interview, Zanfretta recalled being stripped and forced by the abductors to wear a strange helmet, which enabled him to understand their language, but caused him tremendous pain. He also remembered one of the aliens taking his gun and firing the bullets into a panel, in what one can only assume was an effort to see if human weapons had the capability of harming them. Zanfretta then expressed fear over the fact that he may be required to leave his home and family behind. I know that you need me, but I don't want to. I like to be alone. I have 2 children. I feel good this way, and after all you are not human beings. You are horrible. Hundreds of thousands of viewers watched this extraordinary interview, but instead of clearing his name it only further exacerbated the skepticism of his critics and elevated his cult celebrity to a global level. Eventually, as is often the case in unexplained events, the furor died down. That was until Zanfretta was abducted a third time. On the night of July 30, 1979, Zanfretta was on a motorcycle patrol in the residential area of Cordo in Genoa, far from the lonely peaks of Torriglia, when he vanished once more. Again, his fellow guards were the first on the scene. They managed to find him following a 2-hour search on the summit of nearby Mount Fash. It should be noted that local eyewitnesses claimed that they had not seen the young guard or his motorcycle travel up the single road that led to the top of the mountain. This time a hypnotic regression was conducted at International Center of Medical and Psychological Hypnosis in Milan where, on his own request, Zanfretta was injected with sodium pentanol by Professor Marco Marchessin. While under the truth serum's effects, Zanfretta claimed that he was lifted from the ground into the alien spaceship by a mysterious green light. Following the procedure, Professor Marchessin confirmed that no human being can knowingly lie while he is under pentothal treatment, so I think it's very probable Zanfretta had these encounters. Still, for poor Zanfretta, and an even more unfortunate co-worker, the worst was yet to come. At about 10:30 p.m. on Sunday, December 2, 1979, Zanfretta disappeared for the fourth time while driving an Austin Mini in the suburbs of Genoa. This time, however, the 26-year-old would not be the only one to have a brush with the inexplicable. While driving in the hills of Genoa searching for their missing cohort, 4 patrol guards claimed to have clearly seen a very strange, cloud-like object floating above them. Suddenly, 2 beams of light seemed to emanate from within the large cloud, illuminating the patrol cars below. The vehicle's engines concurrently stopped dead, and the frightened, yet curious, guards got out of their patrol cars to get a better look at this UFO. Apparently, the chief, Lieutenant Casiba, became so frightened by the sight before them that fired his pistol at the unknown object. It was then that the ethereal lights were extinguished, and the UFO slipped away. Sadly, Lieutenant Casiba's frightened reaction would not be the most tragic result of this unusual eyewitness event. One of those guards, Germano Zanardi, was so traumatized by the implications of what they had seen that it was said he never fully recovered his mental stability. A few months following this encounter he ended his life with a self-inflicted gunshot to the head. Just when it seemed as if it were impossible, this case took an even weirder turn, when on Monday, December 3rd of the same year, at approximately 9:30 p.m., Zanfretta got out of his patrol car at a self-service gasoline station near downtown Genoa. Zanfretta claimed that he heard someone calling out to him from the shadows outside the station. He described the entity that was speaking to him as a tall, humanoid figure with a bald, egg-shaped head, who was dressed in a checkered suit that included a chest plate made of steel, where the shirt should have been. As bizarre as this description is, it must be noted that legendary paranormal investigator and Mothman Prophecies author, John Keel, was the first to chronicle these beings in his seminal tome on unexplained beasts, The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. Dubbed the Grinning Man by Keel, this lanky creature, or creatures as the case may be, has often been described as wearing a checkered shirt and is frequently associated with paranormal and, in particular, ufological phenomenon such as Men in Black. The first reported encounter with the Grinning Man was said to have taken place on October 11,